Alabama's already the number one class. But the reality of it is they're not the number one class in the composite ranking. They're number one in 247 sports. And then there's a 247 composite ranking, which takes several of the industry leaders and combines into an overall ranking. And right now, Georgia sits atop that list. Why does that matter? Because Nick Saban has proven that if you have the Jimmys and Joes, you can still remain in the mix even when guys go down. If you don't have enough Jimmys and Joes in this college game, especially with the 15 game season, I think that without a doubt they need to really look at bumping up the number of scholarships now that they're asking these kids to play instead of 12 games a season. They're asking them to play 14, 15 games a season to be champions. I think that they need to really, really consider bumping up the number of scholarships from the 85. But until then, you better make sure that you have enough guys that can play and enough guys that can be versatile. Alabama has a huge watch list of guys that are going to be committing today. Alabama's going to try to get their number out of that crew. Ladies, Caitlin, Jade, have you all kept up with the recruiting a little bit? Is that something you all do? I mean, if you like me, there's a million things that you can talk to. Some things you spend a little bit more time on than others, but have you all been able to keep up a little bit with the recruiting process?
Yeah, I think a good amount.
Good
Yeah.
one.
Yeah, we try to keep up with it. I think, like we said earlier in the show, though, early National Signing Day has become kind of a bigger deal now, right? With bigger names signing on early day. So, I mean, National Signing Day is still a really big deal, but it feels like a little less important maybe than it is back in December.
Yeah, it definitely because a lot of the guys, a lot of the main targets are off the board, which makes today interesting with Alabama. If you missed it earlier, Alabama not as many flips. Alabama used to be known. Saban was known as a closer, meaning that it was coming down the stretch. There was guys that thought they were you thought they were going to go every day, every signing day. We would get somebody that someone thought was going to Auburn or someone thought was going to LSU. And we may get someone today, Cedric Van Pran, the big center out of New Orleans, may flip from Georgia, committed to Georgia, but did not sign early. He could be a big flip. Other than Cedric, are there any other guys on here that you think that Alabama, that's a must get for Alabama?
I think all of the fans can agree that McKinley Jackson is probably our biggest target for this season for National Signing Day. We had him on campus twice, I think, during the season, and then we got him back in January. I think he's a pretty strong Alabama commit.
Yeah, and you talk about McKinley Jackson, the big defensive tackle, four-star defensive tackle. Ron Fowler and I, who host the game from 2 to 6 here on Tide 100.9, he and I do Alabama Tradition. And last night we talked about McKinley Jackson. And McKinley Jackson supposedly won MVP of the Alabama Mississippi All Star game as the defensive tackle. That that's one of those drop the mic statements. He was the MVP of the All Star game supposedly. All right. I mean, think about that for a second. MVP of the All Star game as a defensive tackle. That tells you that he's disruptive. And this coach that Ryan was talking to said if he was in any, and this is what you have to think about. He said if he was in any other market, if he was in Atlanta, if he was in Florida, if he was in, somewhere other than Loosedale, Mississippi, he would be a five-star. And I don't know. I hope these guys don't rank. But we talked about this yesterday. Sometimes stars are based on access to camps and how often you can get there and all of that. So we may get a sleeper five-star in McKinley Jackson. Is there anyone in particular you think that Alabama, other than, I mean, she kind of, that's always go first. If there's a panel, always jump on the mic first. And but anyone else you see on there that Alabama really needs to lock down?
Well, I agree with Jade. I think Jackson would be huge for us. Other than that, I would love to land Jones. I think that would be great as well.
Okay, you talking about Jason Jones?
Yeah.
Jason Jones, and he's an interesting guy. He's a local Alabama kid, and he's a defensive tackle. And the reason he's not sold on Alabama is he wants to play defense, and Alabama recruited him as an offensive tackle. And so if you wonder why a 4-star, why there's this, I'm committed, but I'm still gonna go and let me see where else he's looking at in terms of possible places
I think Oregon is pretty.
and, and, and that would not I would not be surprised with his list is Alabama, Baylor, Georgia Tech, and Oregon. I think the Georgia Tech side is probably from as much the academic pool that he's mentioned as part of his recruiting process. What you have to look at when you see Oregon, you're like, Oregon, Cristobal was here when he started getting recruited. Andrew Zal, former Alabama quarterback, was Jason Jones' head coach in high school a couple years ago at Calera. So that connection was established while Cristobal was here, and we saw now a lot of people kind of forgot there was an Alabama guy that didn't play a whole lot here, but went out to the Pac-12 and was dominant. And he was the little brother of Chance Warmack, Dallas Warmack. He was like a beast in the Pac-12.
Yeah, and that leads me to the guy that I really want.
Cedric Von Brom.
I want that O-line. I want to have the biggest, baddest O-line we can get, and I want to have it for years to come because we got the quarterback, we got the wide receivers, we got the running backs. If we can get the O-line to protect them
For years and years to come, then we're unstoppable.
You know, and when you go last, you kind of lose all of the McKinley Jackson check, Cedric Von Pron check. Not sure about Jason Jones. I'm not sure if I don't want a kid that doesn't want to be here and not sure. And the reality of it is, I think that I think he's talented enough. I just think I've seen him play, and I think that Coach Saban knows he does. I think he'd be an All-American as an offensive lineman, but it's sort of like defensive linemen are the sexy guys, you know. I mean, I'm serious. It's like oh, you play line, yeah, offense or defense, offense. And you know, I mean, literally, that's the way it's looked. Offensive linemen are. It's sort of like, do you play, you know, tailback or fullback? You know, it's like, oh yeah, I'm fullback. I get the ball, the other guy gets all the glory. You know, and that's the way you hardly hear about offensive linemen in the scheme of being playmakers and game changers. Even though they have to make a difference every play and protect your most valuable asset, your quarterback. You know, it's funny, they don't get as much love. And I think that's what he's struggling with. I think the guy is absolutely talented enough to play D1. But I think what he's going to find is Nick Saban tells you the truth. And some of these other coaches tell you what you want to hear. Okay? So Nick Saban has come out and said, hey, Jason, you're going to play O-line if you come here. These other guys, oh, we'll play you at D-line. Once he inks that line, they're going to move him where they think he can play, and I think he's an offensive lineman in terms of his skill set. That doesn't mean he won't be a defensive lineman somewhere else. But if he came here, he would not be able to break into that rotation. Another guy that Alfred Collins is a strong side defensive end, kind of a jack. He could be the outside linebacker type for Alabama. He's a big name that Alabama's gotten in on lately. He's committed to Texas, but he's a guy that Alabama possibly could flip. And if they flip him, I think they're getting, you know, a game changer in terms of the pass rush, and it's down between Alabama, Oklahoma, and Texas. You know, he did all of the early signing stuff, long considered to be the Texas guy, but Alabama and Oklahoma both have stayed in the game, and that's the interesting part about the early signing period. It's good for two reasons. If you're one of the 4 or 5 stars that don't get recruited, then everybody starts coming after you. But the other side of it is guys like Rakestraw. You know, all the other big corners have signed. All of the top guys have signed. So coaches out there that still need corners are now finding guys like this, where if in the old days they would have been still trying to hold on to all of the top corners, and a guy like Rakestraw would not have been discovered or would not have been as big a priority. And now you're looking at a guy who is probably, if the numbers worked out, he would be one of the more coveted players for Alabama. So it'll be interesting to see if he's able to break into that category. I would not be surprised if he commit, but also wouldn't be surprised if he commits and signs as a blue shirt. Because he said Alabama is his dream school, but I don't know if our numbers are going to allow us. So I would say if we can get Collins, because we need to get after the passer, and we lost our only 2 pass rushers this year, and we're going to have to beat that outside linebacker up. But Rakestraw will be another great hit. So we'll talk about it tomorrow with Hank South, 247 Sports, Down Online Recruiting. Guru, he joins us every Thursday, so he'll be with us tomorrow to break it down. Jade and Caitlin will be dropping their podcast on Bama Network, on YouTube, you'll record it tomorrow and drop it on Friday. Is that correct? So I'm sure you guys are going to be giving a review of the recruiting and how that went. So anything else special you guys have for your show coming up before we get out of here?
Huge gymnastics meet this Friday, and guess just going over basketball and what needs to be done.
Yeah, basketball and gymnastics. Hey, by the way, gymnastics did finally get that big win last weekend. So, and the first time in a long time they won down in Baton Rouge. So, congratulations to Dana Duckworth, a classmate of mine. Pulling for her to do great things there at Alabama. Everybody's getting better in every sport, and gymnastics is one of them where all the water levels have risen. So we'll talk more about recruiting on the other side. Coming up next, we have Scotty Holland, Blueprint Ministry Executive Director, right here on your home for Alabama Sports, Tide 100.9.